feel like I'm doing a news broadcast. It's like, one of those old ones where, well, I guess there's probably still done the same way. Those local broadcasts where you can never tell whether they were wearing shorts, pajama pants, or dress pants. Because you never saw below the waist. Anyway, enough on that. And I'll be sending you the PowerPoint for this. So I'll kind of announce as I'm going through that I'm switching the slide. So anyway, this week's is on things like structure, culture, how you set your business up. Like last week, it's a little more focused on larger organizations and for-profit organizations than we had done in the first two sections of this class, but hopefully this will be something that is valuable. Ilisavik and the city are perhaps a little smaller than the kind of what would be the best customers for these particular lessons, but ASRC and the borough are not. They would fit right in on a lot of these ideas. In fact, you also will see reorgs going on at the borough as they try to kind of find their optimal level of structure and how formal and how much autonomy people should have. So, not that it can't happen with other organizations, but our two are a little small, maybe. The first thing to explain, just to make sure that we have kind of a common language, is our organizational architecture. Okay, and what that means is two different things. First of all, organizational structure, and that's the formal system of tasks and job reporting structures that determine how employees use resources to achieve their organizational goals. Or to put that more in English, how we decide to group up the tasks. Who does what jobs have what responsibilities, and so on and so forth. This can be rigid, or this can be something that changes quite often. There's not one particular style, it's just the nature of it. Or organizational design is the second, and that's a process by which managers create specific types of organizational structure and culture so that a company can operate in an efficient and effective way. So the structure, that's just what it is. That's what you have. You may have, one where the boss controls what the employees do to every detail, or you may have one that where employees have a lot of autonomy and a lot of say over what they do. And how you're structured is how you structure. That's that's just a fact. Design, and that's how much your manager, the boss, the mayor, is the case of the city, what they're doing to create that structure. So structure would be like your building. Design would be like how you're choosing to use the rooms and where to put the hallways and the bathrooms and such within the building. So, okay, so we have structure and design. Moving to the next slide, slide 3. Okay, so what are the factors that affect an organizational structure? Well, the first one is your organizational environment. Okay? The more stable your environment, the more stable your structure tends to be. And what I mean by that is that when things don't change, then you'll often see, with quite rigid things where the boss has a lot of power. The boss dictates quite clearly what his or her expectations are to employees, and the employees don't have a lot of say over what they do and don't do within an organization. And that's just because we've done it this way for a long time. We know what we're doing, and we just don't. There's not a lot of guesswork to it. The positive of that is, because we're going to talk about high structure, highly formal versus low amounts of structure, low amounts of formality. The advantage to highly structure, high formality is it's easier to bring in and new employee. Jobs are really well defined. And the second one is that your second advantage is that people don't have jobs that change very much. Therefore, you can kind of lower training costs. You train someone once, and they know what they're doing for the rest of time. Versus the disadvantage being that can be a lot more regimented. It's hard to adapt to new circumstances and new information, and employees like to have that power that you lack in a highly structured organization. So, okay, so the environment, the less things change, the more rigid things tend to be. The second thing that affects it is strategy. The more flexibility managers need, the less formal an organization tends to be. So the more that a manager needs to be able to kind of make changes on the fly, make decisions on the fly, and empower his employees to do the same, you can't do that if things have to be a certain way every time, if things have to be rigid. So, when we send employees to the village, we can't also be there telling them exactly how to do their job. That's an example of a low structure, high flexibility environment. Versus payroll, where things are supposed to be done a certain way, would be more highly structured, more highly formal. So that's an example of having it two different ways within the same organization. But you'll see that organizations will tend to be very regimented or not. The borough tends to have a lot of structure. People have a specific set of duties. Whereas you look at a lot of Silicon Valley companies where people are being hired to do products that don't even exist yet. You'll see much more flexible, much less formality. Okay, third factor that affects is technology. The more complicated the technology, the more flexible an organization tends to be. Okay, so if you have a lot of technology and it's really complicated, you will see not a lot of rigidity, high amount of flexibility. Why? Because technology breaks, technology fails, things go wrong. Okay, if you're just moving rocks from here to there, you're pretty sure you're going to be able to carry them. You don't need a lot of flexibility. But if you are depending upon a system which can break, which can fail at any time, and you have no control over that, you need to have a plan B. You need to be able to adapt as your circumstance and situation changes. So therefore, in those times, those kind of companies, those kind of organizations where you have a lot of technology going on, they have to be very flexible because you just never know. The fourth factor is who's working, what I call human resources in the slide. But basically what it means is the more highly skilled your employees, not honestly, just it's not in the book, but generally the more highly paid they are, the greater the amount of flexibility that's needed. People who could go somewhere else, people who have a lot of skills, who have a lot of training, who have a lot of experience and education, that have just, they're really good at what they do. They have options. There are other places they could go, and they tend not to put up with being told exactly how to do their job. They tend to want to have a lot of power over how they do it because they believe themselves to be an expert. Therefore, a highly structured organization, a highly rigid, where they're being told exactly what they need to do, tends not to work for them. They tend to leave that. So those are the four factors: organizational environment, strategy, technology, and human resources. Okay, moving on to the fourth slide. All right. So, why does this all matter? Why worry about the architecture? Why worry about structure and formal versus informal? Well, the reason is because we want our employees to do well, of course. We want them to be highly motivated. We want them to be highly efficient, highly productive. So one of the other things the book talks about is how to design jobs to motivate. Well, or talks about how people have looked into how to design jobs to motivate. Okay, and they found a few things. A few things tend to matter when you are setting up a job and creating it so that it will be something people want to do. The first thing that seems to matter is something called job design. Okay, and that's what they found for a lot of people. Now, none of these, I'm going to make three general points here, and none of these are 100% true for everybody. The idea is that they're true for somebody, they're true for a certain set of people, and it's enough people to worry about to kind of know what they are. Okay, so job design, and that is for a lot of people, the wider variety of tasks, the better. The more things that people doing, the more variety in their job, the more of their brain and of their skill set the job depends on, the better they tend to do. Okay, second one, job enrichment. Okay. For a different set of people, and you don't have to just be in one group. The more power over what the employee does, the better. In other words, the more ability to decide how to do their job, what they need to do, and how they can be most productive, the better that people tend to like the job, the more they tend to be motivated. So the first one was if they're using a wide variety of tasks, that seems to be good. Second, the more power they can have over their choices is good. Okay. The third one is job characteristics, and what this is actually a theory. What it says is that there are 5 individual factors that tend to be motivated or unmotivating. Whereas the first one was just looking at kind of one each: job design and job enrichment. Job characteristics theory says that there's 5, and the first one is a lot like job design. What they call it skill variety. The more skills needed, the better. Okay, so we kind of already talked about that, and job characteristics is incorporating in. Second is something called task identity. And what that is does the employee do all the tasks needed to complete a job? What that means is that in jobs where people they do everything, from beginning to end for a client or for a customer, where they can do they're not just one cog, but they're actually completely satisfying the customer's needs, that tends to be motivating. Right? Third thing, task significance. Okay, this is how important are what they're doing. If the employee views what they're doing as sort of meaningless or just not particularly valuable, tends to be demotivating. Versus if employee sees their job as very important, that tends to be something where they're highly motivating. Firefighters, for example, search and rescue. There may be parts of the job that are not perfect, but they can very easily see that what they're doing is saving lives. So therefore, that tends to be a job where people tend to be highly motivated. Okay, autonomy. We've talked about this. It was the same on job enrichment, that the more control over their job an employee has, the better. Okay, so we've kind of already touched on that. The last factor is feedback, and what that is saying is that when a manager can offer productive and helpful feedback, the employees tend to be more motivated. The better the feedback they're getting, the better the comments and suggestions and the more useful the evaluation, that tends to be very reinforcing that people want to do well. So anyway, the better the feedback, the more people tend to be motivated. Okay, moving on to the last slide, and you'll notice that this is a little shorter, but hopefully that gives you more time to read. This is a very dense chapter. I'm also somewhat limited by how long of a post YouTube will let you put it up at any one point. But anyway, so the final one